What you're looking at is yet another 5,000 word script, which was supposed to be the script for this video. According to wordcounter.net, 29 minutes and 4 seconds long the video would have been, but in actual fact, wordcounter really severely underestimates the time that it takes, and this video would have been another 40 minutes plus. It was going to be another video on Navi and Nvidia's Ampere. And judging by the view count of my last one, you guys really seem to enjoy the graphics stuff. Way more than even the CPU stuff. I guess it is getting a bit more interesting this time around because, yeah, there's a bit of expectation there that the Radeon Technologies group could be on the way back. We will see about that. But what basically happened with this one was I had decided to do another kind of historical thing, similar to what I've done before, and therein lay the problem because I felt like I was simply going over old ground, like going over the Fermi stuff again and going over the Kepler years from a different angle, but I've done that way too many times in the past. On top of that, we got some more leaked information on Ampere, which kinda made me question my analysis. So in the end, all this 5,000 words is basically just getting thrown out, and I have decided to wing it instead. It's going to be a video on Ampere and Big Navi still, just not the scripted one that I thought I would be producing. And at the end of it, there's going to be a leak of Big Navi's specs. You could probably detect by the way that I said leak that this may not be the most reliable piece of information you're ever going to hear on Big Navi. However, it was interesting enough for me to include it. And well, let's just see what you think about it at the end. I've got a feeling you're going to be taking it with a grain of salt. But anyway, moving on to Chip Hell's leak last week. Yeah, 5 days ago. And we got some images of the RTX 3080 cooling solution. And yeah, what an eye-opener this was. As usual, video cards were on the ball pretty fast. And here we can see what is a pretty chunky looking cooler. Very, very meaty heatsink. This blue colour here threw a few people off saying there's no way this is real because of that. But in fact, that is just the plastic going around it. The card itself is a typical Founders Edition sort of silver colour. And here we see a shot of the PCB which has an interesting triangular cutout. And yes, the PCB does actually end there. And if you just look at the PCIe slot, you can maybe tell that this is not a large circuit board. And for me, this was the most interesting image. I don't know where this drawing came from, but it looks accurate. And we can see a dual fan design, one at either side of the card, like the top and the bottom. And we can also see the PCB has this triangular cutout. At the back here, we've got a couple of, is it 6 pins or 8 pins? I would guess 8 pins, or it could be an 8 and a 6 actually, looking at that. And we can also see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 GDDR memory chips. So this is going to be an 8GB card, which is pretty interesting as well. Now looking through the comments over at video cards, and people were pretty much saying what you'd expect. It wasn't the most popular design. In all honesty though, I don't mind it. The first time I saw it I thought, nah, this doesn't do anything for me. But the next day we very quickly got some renders, just by a fan. I'm not sure if it was Reddit or Twitter, but when you look at this, I mean, this is pretty nice. That kind of looks quite good to me. You can see, though, this massive heatsink, which is just about the entire card. And it wasn't long before we got this animated render as well. The card looks very long there, but as we just discussed, the PCB ends there, so the last, what's that, third of it? The last third of the card is simply the heatsink and this fan. Now, another reason why I decided to ditch the script, as I said, was some more information came to light pretty soon afterwards. And over at Igor's lab, Igor Walasek, who used to write for Tom's Hardware and is somebody that I rate very highly. I've been following Igor for some time, right when he started out at Tom's Hardware in fact, and he was always a very competent writer and very good at a technical level as well. Although for some reason he was a bit reserved concerning the images that we just saw. I really don't know why, because nobody is going to go to this kind of length to troll somebody over a GPU cooling system. They're just not going to do that. And we saw it with the Pascal generation of cards, the GTX 1080. A bunch of people said there's no way that Nvidia are going to release that horrible thing. And it looked kind of bad to start with, but in all honesty, It grew on me, and I think it grew on most of us over the following months. But this is another one of these cards that doesn't look like what we expected. And I think that's throwing people off, but clearly this is a legitimate leak. So I'm not entirely sure why Igor didn't believe it. But he waited on confirmation anyway, and from his own sources, discovered that Nvidia has announced an internal investigation into the leak. And the focus is going to be on Foxconn and Build Your Dreams, who are the contract manufacturer for the Founders Edition. So basically, yeah, it's legit. Now, according to Igor, speaking of the coolers, the industry is currently offering a production price of $150 for the entire design. That is the housing and the cooler in one piece. Now, I just don't know about that. $150 for a cooler? A GPU cooler? I mean, just go over to Amazon and you can pick up a Noctua CPU Threadripper cooler for like $80. This cooler for $130. I mean, look at the size of that thing. You can get all-in-ones for less than $150, and really you're talking half the price for high-end CPU coolers. I just don't think $150 is a reasonable price. On the other hand, Igor says that this also suggests that the positioning and pricing of the Founders Edition might be significantly higher. If he'd started with this and suggested that perhaps this $150 number that we've just seen here is Nvidia prepping us for the inevitable shafting that is surely coming our way on pricing, then now I can believe $150. In terms of the actual value of this, I highly, highly doubt it. But he had even more information, which went a bit beyond just the pictures. And he noted that the more complex cooler design requires a special circuit board with the additional cutout. So again, this is this triangular cutout we're talking about. But he then goes on to say that the internal designation is PG133, so that'll be the circuit board's designation of PG133. And it should be able to be used for all three versions on launch day. And by those three versions, he appears to be talking about chips based on GA102, which would be the highest end gaming Ampere chip. And his information also stated the top end chip would be the RTX 3090, so not the Titan, with potentially a 3080 Ti or Super, and then just the normal 3080. And we can see that the 3090 is going to be a Titan in everything but name, 24GB of GDDR6. And his information also said 11GB for the 3080 Ti or Super and 10GB for the 3080. But again, this brings me back to this image of video cards and those 8 chips, and I just don't know. And Donnie and I had a chat about this over in Discord, and he also believed that the leak was real. Donnie reckoned that the GPU, the 3080 GPU, which he thought must be GA104, this was before Igor's information, it must be around about 350 square millimeters. And my instant response was, it's going to be bigger than that. But Donnie stuck with it, maintaining that he is sure that they must be going back to a smaller die, because that PCB is only like 8 inches or so. And we to and froed a bit, and eventually I came around to his way of thinking. Because yeah, that PCB is really, really small. Igor speculated that this reference PCB is only 21.3 centimeters long, and he's talking about the one without the cutout. There's going to be another PCB like this, except without this triangular cutout, and he reckons that's going to be 21.3 centimeters. Now, looking around some of the current cards, there is this very small Zotac Gaming 2070 Super Mini, which is, of course, because it's the Super, it's based on the pretty large 545 square millimeter TU104, the same chip that the 2080 was built on. So it's not like you can't cram a very large chip onto a very small PCB. And we can see that this is not a big card at all. But Donnie had a look at it, and this is it here, the 2070 Super Mini. We can see the chip, and again we can see 8 GDDR chips around it. But this new circuit board on the supposed 3080 and 3080 Ti and 3090, it would be basically looking like this, except with this bit cut out. And I also believe that the Super Mini is a little bit thicker, which may allow for the larger GPU. So I decided then to look at the specs of the current cards. 2080 Ti, click on specifications over at Nvidia. And the length is 266.7 millimeters. Now, Igor said 21.3 centimeters, so we're talking 5.5 centimeters longer for the 2080 Ti Founders Edition. And that is pretty much the size of the PCB. Even going back to the 1080 Ti, it's the same card length, 10.5 inches or 26.7 centimeters. And now we're supposed to believe that from about here to here is going to be enough for an RTX 3090. And that includes 12 memory chips. And according to Igor, up to 350 watts of typical board power. I don't know about you guys, but until I saw this, and because I rate Igor so highly, Donnie had basically convinced me that, yeah, we're going to be seeing GA104 for the RTX 3080. But you tell me, I mean, how is this thing supposed to house Nvidia's top gaming chip? I just don't know how it's possible. And I do again want to bring attention to these memory configurations, 10, 11 and 24. We've got this drawing again, I wish I knew where it came from, but we've clearly only got 8 chips there. Can you squeeze another 4 down the bottom there? Maybe just about looking at this super, but again, that's even more power, even more complexity to the PCB. Obviously, it's possible that they can mix 2GB and 1GB chips, but fast 2GB GDDR6X, that is going to be really expensive. Even for this lowest card here, the 3080 would need 2 of those GDDR6X. And if this is actually anywhere near a $150 cooling solution, then you have to wonder how much these are gonna cost. And I guess the final thing to talk about are these board powers. 350 watts, that is up quite a lot on what Nvidia's been doing recently, which is a good sign because it probably means that they really are needing to push themselves this time. And well, I'll analyse it all towards the end. Now, like I said at the top of the video, I was handed some information, we'll call it, rather than me suggest that this is a leak, on Big Navi. And that is what the subject of the email I received was, Big Navi. Now, we'd already seen plenty of evidence of perhaps a 505 square millimeter GPU, which we do believe is the biggest one. And there was also the suggestion of another 2. Navi 22 is 340 square millimeters, and Navi 23 is 240. So Navi 21, that'd be the big one, at around 505 square millimeters. The email I received came from an anonymous email service. And it was one of those prank ones where you can also change the sender. So this person had spoofed an email coming from inside of AMD, one of the AMD departments. And normally that would be enough for me to say, yeah, this is bullshit. However, they made no real attempt to hide the fact that it was coming from this anonymous email service, because the email itself included the fact that it was sent from this anonymous prank email service. But anyway, the information was Big Navi. The die size is actually 514 square millimeters, so slightly larger than 505. Now, the original leaker of this, who we do believe may be a TSMC employee, he was eyeballing this, and he reckoned 505 plus or minus, 5 or 10 millimeters. So 514 square millimeters is easily close enough. The second piece of information, and one which I speculated on in the last video, and one which most people agree on now, I would say, is we do expect 80 compute units for the biggest Navi 2X. Whether or not there are more and it's cut down, we simply don't know. But 80 has been the consensus for some time. The next piece of information, 512-bit memory bus. Now, I think it's fair to say that I am one of the very few who reckon 512-bit is what AMD will go with. I think most commentary has been around 384. For me though, the die size of 505 or thereabouts, that simply told me it's much more likely to be a 512. And I do realise we haven't seen that 512-bit memory bus for a very long time. But we also need to realise that AMD hasn't actually released a high-end graphics card in, 4 years? I'm sorry, I'm not counting Vega as high-end. It was quite large and it was HBM controllers anyway, but the performance was squarely in the mid-range. Anyway, I'm not shitting on Vega again. The next piece of information, 16GB at 20 gigabits per second. There was no mention of it was GDDR6X or just normal 6. And then we had a TDP of 400 watts. Again, in this video, I speculated that, I'll put it this way, If the 5700 XT is a 225 watt chip, then there is absolutely zero reason why doubling that would not allow AMD to go as far as 400 watts. This is simply a cooling solution. If the chip scales that far, why not push it to its limits? Now you may be thinking, there's not a whole lot there, Jim. There's nothing there that you basically didn't guess at yourself, and I would agree with that. And in all honesty, this is the kind of information that I see a lot, and I normally just get back to the person, if I can, contact them via email saying, yeah, that sounds about right. I wouldn't have guessed too far away from that. But the next piece of information in the email, this did pique my interest. It said tightened tolerances for D4120 XTX / D41711 XT / D41401 XL. Now, when I see something like tightened tolerances, this tells me that it's an engineer, as this is engineering language. And these codenames, D4120 XTX, D41711 XT, and D41401 XL, I had never come across these. So obviously, the first thing you do is you Google these. And the first one I Googled, the 4120 XTX, nothing showed up. However, the second one I Googled, D41711, turned up this post by REUPLOAD, and I noted also that he had discovered on the 26th of May Navi 21XT and some codename of D41711 and Navi 21XTX D41201. Very similar to what I was just given. And Komachi also had something very similar just a few days before I received the email. These are really close to what I was given, but not identical. And what I was given was written differently, with the XTX, the XT, and XL coming at the end. So that was very curious, I thought. And by this stage, all this information I'm getting, it all simply adds up. And even more so when I saw the revision of A1, again, that's a silicon engineering type of thing. By this point, I'm thinking, yeah, this is obviously something legit. These specs are very, very likely to be true. So, what was the problem then? Did I not say that you guys would take this with a grain of salt? Many grains of salt, in fact. Well, there was also one other piece of information that I received, and that was, of course, the clock speed. And I thought long and hard about even telling you about this, but hopefully you can see what it's like for us in this leaking game. Somebody gives you that kind of information, especially stuff like this. I mean, sure, they may be following REUPLOAD, they may be following Komachi. I wasn't aware of these codenames until I received that email. The fact here is, on Twitter, I'm going to miss all this stuff unless somebody tags me. I'm not spending all day on Twitter looking at this stuff. So 99% of this will just fly way past me unless I get tagged. And then there's a wording of tightened tolerances. If you're paying close enough attention to this stuff, you will have seen probably Mark Papermaster or somebody using that language before. But it's not exactly in common use. So if you're any kind of analyst at all, you're looking at that and saying, yeah, I mean, this is clearly legitimate. Problem was, of course, the clock speeds were astronomical and just unbelievable. According to this person, Big Navi has 80 compute units clocked at 2,760 megahertz. Now, in this last video that I made, I knew I was being conservative, and I did it deliberately. I went with 2050 megahertz for Big Navi, when the PlayStation 5 we already know is 2.23 gigahertz. And if you look back in history at the speed of the game consoles versus the graphics cards at that time, the graphics cards were always 20% plus faster than the actual consoles. The PlayStation 4 was 800 megahertz? And that was based on Pitcairn. It was very close to the Radeon HD 7850. However, that was the same chip, Pitcairn, as the HD 7870 gigahertz edition. So there was an AMD graphics card which was 20% faster in clock speed compared to the PlayStations. And it had more cores. The PlayStation was 18 compute units, while the 7870 was 20. And the 7870 was only a 175 watt TDP card. And in fact, looking at Tech PowerUp's review of the cards, the 7850 and the 7870, power consumption of these was absolutely incredible. 7850 was down at 87 watts average gaming consumption, with the 7870 only 103 watts. Even at peak, which was the highest measured load running something like Crysis 3. 115 watts only for the 7870. And even the maximum, that is running firm mark, the card only hit 144 watts. This was a card that was 20% faster in clock speed with another 11% more cores than the PlayStation 4. And yet power consumption was barely over 100 watts while gaming. Then later on you had the PS4 Pro, and obviously we also got the Xbox One X, which were both based on Polaris. Again, the clock speeds of those consoles, quite a bit down on the actual graphics card, between 15 and 25% again. Now we know it's what, 2.23 gigahertz, you just add 25% to that. You're actually clearing 2.76 gigahertz. And again, 2.23 plus 25%. Yeah, 2.79 gigahertz. That would be. So there's nothing particularly controversial even about that. However, obviously, there's no way I'm going to say that 2.76 gigahertz is what we're going to see with Big Navi. There's just that feeling that it's a little bit too good to be true. But with that said, if we're talking a peak gaming load and the average is around about 2.4, 2.5, maybe that's a bit more reasonable. But obviously, I really don't need to tell you, do not put any weight behind this being true. I have simply told you exactly what I was given, and I have told you the reason why. Essentially, all of the information this person gave me would have been treated as basic fact by me had it not been for this seemingly outrageous 2760 megahertz suggested clock speed. I got one more piece of information at the end. It was some kind of code which I was unable to decipher, and the person explicitly said, do not show this part. I don't know what it was code for, I simply could not decipher it. It may well be that this person will use this in future to give me some more information. I just don't know. Right, so to end this one, it's just been kind of bizarre, to be honest. Something's happening because I'm being contacted by people who I've not heard from for a very long time, and the whole thing's just getting a bit weird, to be honest. Whatever Nvidia's doing with this weird little circuit board with a massive cooler, I can't even figure this out, how this makes sense in any way. RTX 3090 instead of a Titan? I mean, to me, that says that they know they're going to lose. And like I said in the last video, there's no way that they would allow the Titan to lose. So if they've discovered that, yeah, they are going to lose, then this RTX 3090 certainly makes a whole lot more sense. But that said, RTX 3080 Ti, are they even going to risk the Ti? Which made me think, well, you know what? Maybe that's why it says the extension here is Ti or Super. Nvidia really does care about these brands. They would hate to see the Ti losing. The Titan cannot lose to an AMD card. That's a disaster. But if you make a new card called the 3090, just for maybe one series until they get it back together again on 5nm, maybe they'll get away with that. And the 3080, that can be called the Super. It's not a big loss. Even if they lose heavily, it's only the 3090 and the Super that lost. The Titan and the Ti are still undefeated. These kind of things, this is why Nvidia is so damn good at marketing. And if the information that I got is true, or even if it's anywhere near true, 2.5 gigahertz, that is what I was expecting for Nvidia on this node. It's why I was so disappointed in Navi last year, because I expected Nvidia to get 2.5 gigahertz, not 1.9. But if AMD are above 2.5 gigahertz, with a 505 square millimeter chip, and now Nvidia, I mean, how big a chip can you realistically fit onto this PCB? And according to this, 350 watts, whereas my information and all of my analysis says that AMD can easily surpass 350 watts with Big Navi, and that leak, or whatever you want to call it, that I got stating 400 watts for the card. This is all adding up to something very, very promising looking for AMD. And you've probably heard this elsewhere, but they are sounding pretty confident. But look, we've said this before about the Radeon Technologies Group. However, there has been that feeling this time for a very long time now that they really, really do have something that little bit special. And we also know that Nvidia, they have made a pig's ear of 7nm. And this could be them getting their comeuppance. All of this stuff, it all adds up to AMD winning. And that might sound like a bit of a reversal on my last video. Remember what I said. I was told performance per watt. Ampere was very, very efficient in terms of performance per watt, whereas RDNA 2 maybe not so much. But AMD could still end up with the ultimate performance if they push their cards that little bit further. 400 watts versus 350 watts. These next few weeks are going to be some of the most exciting in years as far as the GPU war has gone. And I just wish that I could really get back into it, but there's something missing for me. It's just not the same. I just haven't had the motivation these past couple of months, or maybe, well, it's been longer. It's been 2 years, in fact, where I kind of gave up on the GPU side of things altogether. And the CPU side, that has been great, with AMD coming back so strongly. Sadly, Intel are just so weak that it's kind of boring there as well. We just expect Milan to thrash them now, and I can't even get excited about that. So AMD takes every single crown as soon as Milan is launched. They're already so far ahead in so many metrics. If AMD beats Nvidia at graphics, well, like I said, how much do you think these are going to cost? And with that in mind, how much do you think AMD are going to be asking for their long overdue table-topping graphics cards? We probably don't have that much longer to wait until we have a much better idea.